People don't give a fuck what you say. A lot of people do not understand this. They care about what you do. All of a sudden, you second guess so many obstacles in my path.
I'm gonna hold your hand when I say
You don't think that you gonna make
it
it?
seems like there's something standing in my way. Keep relying on
It
tomorrow.
could change the entire trajectory of baseline. Life is. You the baseline. The moment that they see you not display the things that you preach, it don't fucking matter. You feel me? What's going on, everybody? It's that ordinary podcaster with the extraordinary thoughts that tells you to stop being great and be extraordinary. I'm your host, Demetrius Thickpen, also known as Meech Speaks, and welcome back to another episode of the Meech Speaks podcast. Now, before we get started with this podcast, don't forget to head on over to your favorite streaming platform, whether that's Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts, and leave this podcast an honest review, because this podcast deserves to grow just as much as we do. All right, so staying true to exactly what I did in January, February is all about self. And when I say self, I'm talking about confidence. I'm talking about awareness. I'm even going to talk about love. But the one thing that I have to talk about, and I don't know who need to hear this, all right? And I feel like this gotta be the first thing that we talk about. You know what I mean? Like, this gotta be the first thing that we talk about. And that's fucking self-accountability. All right. Now, one thing that I will say, and I've said it before, and I will say it again, and I will say it until I'm blue in the face, but we got to bring back correction. Like, we got to bring back corrections. And I know it's somebody out there right now that's saying, I make corrections, or I'm out there correcting Marines. Are you fucking correcting yourself? You feel me? Like, are you correcting yourself? And if you really correcting yourself, then you making honest corrections. And when I say an honest correction, I'm not talking about demoralizing anybody. I'm not talking about putting someone down. I'm not talking about calling anyone out of their name. I'm talking about making honest fucking corrections. Because if you really want to talk about confidence, if you really want to talk about awareness, if you really want to talk about self-love, then how the fuck are you not going to talk about accountability? Because if you refuse to hold yourself accountable, you're going to be living a lie. So how the fuck are you going to live a lie? Let me rephrase that. How the fuck are you going to love yourself if you're living a lie? So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with today's episode. All right. Now, the first thing that I will say is, what is accountability? Because accountability, one thing about accountability is that it looks the same across the board. You feel me? Accountability is owning up to your shit. And I don't know who need to hear this, man, but we really need to change the way that we view a shitbag, okay? And I feel like now it seems like it's a term of endearment. But when I would hear the word shitbag, I knew for a fact that person was a piece of shit. I knew for a fact that that person was a piece of shit. I knew that that person was a detriment to the organization. I knew for a fact that if I heard somebody call me a shitbag, I immediately got offended. That's not something that I wanted to, I didn't strive to be a shitbag, okay? But now it seems like we strive to want to be shitbags. Like, yeah, man, that's cool. You know what I mean? Yeah, I'm a shitbag. No, you're not. No, you're not, brother. You don't want to be a shitbag. Because I can tell you this right now, and this is why we got to redefine this, man, or get back to how it used to be. Because of the simple fact that if you were a shitbag, you were a detriment to the organization. If you were a shitbag, you were a problem to anybody that came around you. If you were a shitbag, you were constantly making excuses for your piss poor behavior. If you were a shitbag, you lacked self-accountability. It was everybody else's fault, and it wasn't yours. So when I tell you that accountability is owning up to your shit, accountability is owning up to your shit. Because if you refuse to, right? Like if you refuse to, then you definitely gonna become a shitbag. You feel me? You definitely gonna be this person that was a piece of shit in the organization. You were a piece of shit in your fucking family. You were a piece of shit in your fucking community. You came into the military, and as soon as you got done with your time in the military, you just went back to being a piece of shit. You ain't just gonna automatically switch gears and I'm a piece of shit here. Guess what? I'm great out there. No, because you never corrected yourself. You never owned up to anything that you did. It was everybody else's fault, and it was never yours. And because it was never your fault, you wonder why shit constantly fails around you. You wonder why your relationships are constantly falling apart. You wondering why your family not fucking with you. And that's because you a piece of shit and you refuse to own up to it. So when I tell you, accountability is all about owning up to exactly what you did, who you are, and how you can fix it. What people do not understand about me, And I know I'm coming in hot and heavy on this episode because this shit really means a lot to me. But I'm a shitbag Marine that survived the transformation to be a top tier performer. At some point in my entire career, bro, like some point in my entire career, I had to tell myself, like, dude, you need to lock the fuck in. You need to get your shit together or you're going to end up right back in Detroit. So when I tell you it's important, bro, because you know for a fact that you could be doing a lot better. You know that though. You know you could be doing a lot better. But if you don't tell yourself that you could be doing a lot better, then you never will. And in order for you to tell yourself that you're doing a lot better, you have to acknowledge the worst that you're doing right now. You got to. Now, this is the reason why it's so important. And I will always give the why. Because if you refuse to acknowledge the accountability, it will always be somebody else's fault. It will always be somebody else's fault. Matter of fact, you probably done came across somebody in your entire time that you knew for a fact had zero accountability. It's their fault. It's their fault. You know what? It's my first sergeant's fault why he's giving me a hard time. It's my platoon sergeant's fault why he's giving me a hard time. It's my corporal's fault. It's not me. And if you listen to those people, right, it almost sounds like, bro, like, what the fuck are you doing? When you hear their story, you have to ask yourself, like, damn, man, like everywhere you go, somebody giving you a hard time. And that's exactly what it sounds like when you lack accountability. This is why it's so fucking important. Because when you lack it, everywhere you go, it will always be somebody else's fault. It was their fault when you were in the Marine Corps or when you were in the military. It was their fault when you were in school. You feel me? And now it's their fault while you're getting fired from your job. It's their fault why the relationship didn't fucking work. It's their, like, when you don't have the accountability, it's always someone else's fault. But here's the thing though. It's important because of the simple fact that when you have it, right? Like when you have it, and I will tell you this right now, man, because it's easy to sit back and say like, hey man, like when you have accountability, shit gonna change for you. No, it don't, bro. The moment that I told myself that I needed to get my shit together, the next day I got my ass chewed. But I would tell you, it allowed me to be able to recognize my piss poor behavior. That's the biggest thing right there. When you start to have accountability, it allows you to start recognizing your piss poor behavior. But here's the thing though, because earlier I said like we need to get back to corrections. You feel me? We need to get back to letting people know that they fucked up. We need to get back to letting them know like, hey man, why your camis fucked up? Why you ain't got a haircut? Why you late? Why you fat? Why you all? Because when you holding someone else accountable, when you correcting people, you gonna correct yourself. Okay? I'll say that again because I don't think a lot of people really understand what I'm saying. When you correct someone else, the first thing that you gotta do, you see what I'm saying? Because I said honest corrections. That means you gotta be honest with yourself. That means that you gotta hold yourself to a standard. And that's why it's truly important. Because when you have accountability, you recognize the behaviors that you're doing, whether those are good or bad. But it allows you, bro, like it allows you to raise the standard. You see what I'm saying? Like it allows you to raise the standard of who you are. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and act like I'm a great Marine. I'm all right. All right. I'm better than a couple of people. I ain't even about to lie to you. All right. Like if you put me up against about, I'll say 10. All right. I'm about to beat 9 of them. All right. But that's me knowing me. That's me knowing me. But that one dude, he probably going to beat me. He probably going to beat me, but I'm all right. All right. I'm all right. But I didn't get there overnight. I had to recognize my piss poor behaviors. I had to hold myself accountable first. So when I tell you that it's important, bro, it's important because you are going to go out there and you're going to try to make a correction. But before you even make that fucking correction, right? Like before you even make that correction, you're going to look yourself over. You're going to make sure that you good first. And when you make sure yourself is good, you're already ensuring that you're at the standard that you set for yourself. And then you're able to make that correction. That's why I want the corrections to come back, because it'll lock you on before it'll lock the guy on. And here's the thing though, because you think that this is just a military episode. Let's switch gears a little bit, because I promise you, when you have accountability, you could take that shit anywhere you go. You will go into a relationship. Before you want somebody else to change, you gonna make sure that you are the person that can even help someone change. You gonna have a standard, But you gonna also set yourself to a standard that somebody else will want to have in their life as well. Because you understand you're good and you understand you're bad. You ain't telling somebody to rise to a standard that you can't rise to. You rose to that standard. And because you rose to that standard, you can now tell somebody like, hey man, this is where I'm at. If you're not gonna meet me there, then don't meet me there. But I did a lot of legwork to get to this point right here. So that's the why, bro. Like that's why it's important. I've talked about the what, I've talked about the why, but I've never really talked about the how. Like how the fuck do we find ourselves getting to self-accountability? And the best way that I could describe that, I remember being that junior Marine. And I've told this story 100 times over, but that was exactly how I got there. I had been getting my ass chewed nonstop, dude. Like I'm talking about like I remember being a junior Marine, you feel me? And I knew for a fact that I was going to eventually get kicked out of the military. You know what I mean? Like I knew for a fact that at one point the Marine Corps was going to kick me out. And that's exactly what happened. The Marine Corps was eventually going to kick me out. And I was getting a failure to adapt. And I remember a sergeant pulling me off to the side and he telling me like, Thigpen, I don't know if you realize, but you are about to end up back in Detroit. You really need to lock the fuck in. And even when he said I needed to lock the fuck in, I didn't even understand what the fuck he was talking about. Right after that, I got my ass chewed. Immediately when I got my ass chewed. And I remember coming back to my room. And I started asking, like, what am I doing? I sat in my room by myself, dude. Like, and I said, what the fuck am I doing wrong? I'm faster than everybody. Okay. I know I physically, I know I'm good. I could learn this job. Why is it that this Marine is not getting in trouble, but this Marine is? Why are my pros and cons always so fucking low? And I had to realize like, dog, like it's me. And a lot of people don't want to say that. You feel me? Like a lot of people don't want to say that. It's me. I'm the one that's fucking this up. I'm the reason why I'm about to get kicked out. Ain't nobody else. It's me. From the way I'm handling things to the way that I'm speaking, I had to break all of that down. And when I broke all of that down, I started to realize like, okay, we can tweak here. We can fix this. We can find a different way to be able to deliver that. And when I did though, like, when I did, I became fucking unstoppable. Like I wasn't me. I haven't been me the past 16 years. I figured out how to do this damn near 2 years into the Marine Corps. I figured out how to do this. And when I did, all I did was just add another layer to it, tweak this, fix this, and I got right back to it. That's how I was able to do it. There it is. If you keep asking, what the fuck am I doing wrong? You're going to find the problem. If you are going to the gym and you're wondering why you're not losing weight, you have to ask yourself first, what the fuck am I doing wrong? If you showing up to work and you're constantly getting your ass chewed, you have to ask yourself, what the fuck am I doing wrong? If you constantly are getting into relationships and those relationships are falling apart, you have to ask yourself, what the fuck am I doing wrong? If you are finding yourself in a new situation and it falls apart every single time, you have to ask yourself, what the fuck am I doing wrong? And the only time where you will be able to find real accountability is when you try to find out what you are doing wrong. And the moment that you find out what you are doing wrong, that's when you're going to be able to gain the tools to be able to figure out what you're doing right. Let's talk about the cause though. You see what I'm saying? Because the cause is the most important piece in this entire episode. See, when I apply accountability in my life, you know what, matter of fact, because I always talk about what it looks like on the end when you do it. Let's talk about what it looks like when you refuse to do it. And I will say this, man. Have you ever had a conversation with somebody and as they explain the story, you realize that it's their fault. It's their fault. Now, here's the problem, though, is that usually when you realize that it's their fault in that story, you won't say anything. You won't call them out for it. You just listen to them. You say shit like, damn, that's fucked up. Damn, that's crazy. Man. But in reality, you know that it was them. You hear that person tell another story, and you listen to it again, and you realize, like, damn, bro, this sounds familiar like the last story. And then you hear them tell another story about a different situation, and you say to yourself, like, bro, okay, it might be you. The cause of what it looks like when you don't have accountability, you will always be the common denominator. You will always be the common denominator for something bad, bro. Because no matter where you go, it's always going to fall apart because you refuse to acknowledge the part that you play in the situation. It's easy, and once again, it's easy to point the finger at somebody else because nobody wants to sit back and say that they fucking suck. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to admit that they fucked up. Nobody wants to admit that it was their fault. But when you don't, you lie to yourself. You lie to yourself. And you tell yourself that it was somebody else's fault, knowing that you had a part to play in that. Knowing that you had a part to play in it. Now, switch gears. What it looks like when you actually do it the right way. Everywhere you go, you're able to enable some type of change because you already have a standard. You see what I'm saying? When you utilize accountability and you apply that shit to your life, everywhere you go, you are going to be able to make a change for the better because you already have established a certain standard for yourself. And when you fall short of that standard, you ensure that you can rise back up to it. And everybody else around you, you will hold them to that standard that you have for yourself. This is what accountability really fucking looks like. Because everywhere you go, and we've come across people like this before, that as soon as they step into a room, everybody else has to step their fucking game up. Everybody else has to step their fucking game up because he's going to hold you to a fucking standard. And when you hold yourself to a standard, you're able to hold everyone else to the same standard that you're holding yourself to. And you don't look fucking ridiculous when you talk about it. And that's the worst thing that you could do is look ridiculous when you're trying to hold somebody to a standard that you're never going to be. So I would tell you this, man. One of the biggest things that I will say throughout this entire episode, let me rephrase that. One of the biggest things that I've said throughout this entire episode is the fact that if you want to talk about self-love, if you want to have confidence, if you want to be aware, the one thing that you have to have is accountability. Because everything else is going to be a lie until you accept the part that you play, whether that's the good, the bad, the ugly, or the pretty. So with that, and just like that, another extraordinary thought left this ordinary mind. I hope you enjoyed this episode half as much as I enjoy making it. Don't forget to head on over to your favorite streaming platform, whether that's Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts, and leave this podcast an honest review because this podcast deserves to grow just as much as we do.